All right, another podcast from the Michigan Institute of Athletics in Brighton, Michigan. This is going to be an awesome podcast today. I'm bringing our From the Ground Up series back. I have a gentleman today that I have a ton of respect for, someone that I've known for many, many years, a gentleman that wears a ton of titles. There's just a lot of ways that you could define this man, and really that's what we should be as human beings. He's very multi-talented. He's a documentary maker. He's a jiu-jitsu practitioner. He's a father. He's a husband. He has many roles in the community, and throughout the time that I've known him, he's gone out of his way to try to make the world a little bit better of a place, and that's something that I can always appreciate. So right before we get into it and I introduce the guest, I want to go over that this podcast is, again, sponsored by VetLife. And VetLife is a 501c3. It's a nonprofit organization created by veterans for veterans. Pretty much everybody knows someone that served in the military that has had difficulty transitioning back to normal civilian life. And when you're in the military, you have a certain level of brotherhood and camaraderie that goes away. And if you don't have somebody to help ease that transition, things can be chaotic. So if you're looking for benefits or you're just trying to get back into community and back into society without stress, please reach out to VetLife. You can reach out to them on Instagram, on Facebook, vetlifetoday.org, or just message me directly for the details. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Mike Ramsdell, the gentleman that's joining me here today. And for the people that don't know you, Mike, tell us just a little bit about your background on how you met me and came to this academy, and then we're going to go into your story.
Excellent. First of all, you have a fantastic voice for radio.
Thank you.
Second of all, let's do this.
Cheers, brother.
That is Crown Royal. That is delicious. All right, so how I met you. Growing up, I'm 47 now, so a little bit older than all of you guys. Excuse me, I swallow my crown. So when I was a kid and when I was coming up, the only martial arts available was like Taekwondo, karate, judo. So I did Taekwondo and karate and Kung Fu a little bit, which were fun and great, but then I got introduced to mixed martial arts. It's the only way I was trying to get back into it, and that was the only thing that was available. So I was pretty good on my feet, wasn't very good on the ground. Thought I should learn how to get back up if a wrestler takes me down. I heard of you, came to your gym, caught the jiu-jitsu bug, and that was 7 years ago, and we've known each other ever since.
That's awesome. And it's been an awesome journey, man, and the progress. I remember when you first came in, you were a striker. You like to be on the feet. You're long, you're rangy. And then I watched the jiu-jitsu bug hit you. I saw the evolution, and it's stronger now than ever, I would believe. You really have the passion now to want to master the fine details, which only comes with a love for the sport. The people that don't reach the upper echelons of jiu-jitsu usually lack that love for the sport. They want to get good, they want to be effective, they want to be able to be defensive and offensive, but they don't really want to master the art of jiu-jitsu. In the last couple of years, I've really seen a transition in you where I can tell for a long time you've always wanted to get great at jiu-jitsu, but you're really appreciating the art now and trying to be one of those gentlemen that embodies what it is to be a high-level jiu-jitsu practitioner.
It is by far the most beautiful martial art that I've been involved in. I often reflect on why it is that it's caught me in a different way than the other ones have. I think it's because, I'm sure there's a lot of reasons. It's like asking why you love your wife. You can't describe it all, but jiu-jitsu gives you the time and pressure with which to respond to a situation. Whereas in striking, obviously there's a ton of pressure. The consequences of failure are significant. But it's a more, the burst is there. There's the safe place, and then you're in the fire, then you're out of the fire, then you're in the fire. With jiu-jitsu, you're always in the fire. And there's a tremendous amount of mental and physical stress when you're going, at a high level with somebody who is either as good as you or better than you. But there's also time to think and the necessity to think throughout the whole thing. And to me, this is where I lose the vocabulary to try to articulate it, but it is two very different mindsets when you're in a striking match and when you're in a grappling match. Even a wrestling match versus a jiu-jitsu match. That to me has been the most beneficial thing of jiu-jitsu is the amount of stress you have to deal with over the entire role is a stressful experience. And to continue to dig deeper and deeper. At first you're like, okay, it's my muscle reaction. I just got to push hard. I got to explode hard. I got to do all that. And then it's like, okay, that's not going to work, so I have to learn to relax. Okay, so now I'm relaxed. Now what the hell do I do? Okay, well, I noticed that I can get the underhook here, so let me see that. James always talks about, that does work. Now what is that? And then you see, well, wait a second. This underhook opens up this entire sequence, and then this arm is the only thing keeping me from getting over here. And so if I can move. So all of that becomes accessible to you, but it's not just in theory like we're sitting here talking it. You are in the middle of a fight with another human being who's trying to do bodily damage. And that skill in and of itself is the one I will probably never, ever, ever, ever use jiu-jitsu on the street. I hope I never use jiu-jitsu on the street. But what we're talking about right now, I use every single day and makes me better as a human being every single day. So that's where the real love and passion has come in.
If you were considering whether you should try jiu-jitsu or not, play that clip back, and I think Mike just sold it for everybody. I mean, that was a stellar description. Really, you're painting a picture that is so complex that you don't even see the painting until as you make progress. And like you said, you connect one thing to the other. Wait a second, this isn't just an underhook. This is the entry to an entire series that opens a plethora of options that I can then attack or, sweep or any type of game. You start to see the complexity of it, and then that's more engaging. It becomes more enjoyable.
It becomes wildly enjoyable, and even when you're losing or when you're going with somebody you know is going to beat you, there was a sign I saw that says leave your ego and shoes off the mat, and that's the thing. If you come to jiu-jitsu just to win, then fine, cool, but that's going to be you probably won't get past the blue belt because that's when you're going to quit winning. But if you come to jiu-jitsu just to say, I'm not here to win, I'm not here to lose, I'm here to practice the art of jiu-jitsu, it's not to be too cheesy, but then it leaves the mind and goes into a different place in your body's wiring.
You're truly enjoying the experience.
100%.
So let's talk a little bit about your story. So you're a gentleman that at this point in your life, you're a documentary filmmaker who I personally know has been all over the world. You've been in the Congo. You've been alongside elite level athletes. You have a short film coming out on Taylor Dewar out of Detroit. A gentleman who's complete feature film. Who has completely turned his life around. I mean, he is the story that everybody can appreciate. He's the Rocky story mixed with extreme adversity through drugs and things like that. So it's the story that we can all admire. But I want to wind the clock back, all the way back to when you were a young man. You were thrown into this world at a much different state than what we are at now. 2020, the children being raised now are living in a different experience, a completely different life than what we grew up on,
Well, yeah, and you grew up in a different world than I grew
100%.
up on. My first email address was mikeramsdell@hotmail.com because I was the first Mike Ramsdell, and Hotmail, I mean, it literally came out when I was in college. I was like, oh, okay, cool.
I guess I'll make one of these things.
I guess I'll be, Mike Ramsdell at Hotmail. That makes sense. And, so that's how long, and I was 21 when that happened. So I was in a very different world growing up. There was only 13 channels on the TV, and you had to get up and actually turn the channel. We came out with remote controls. I'm not that old. We did have remote controls, and we had cable and stuff like that. But yeah, it was a very different environment. When
I was an extremely young kid, my uncle Steve told me that there was a new RAM that was coming out, and they had upgraded the RAM from 128 megabytes to 256, and he was getting 2 of them, and he was like, I'll never need more. Like,
never.
You don't understand how high-end this technology is getting.
Disk in there and get
100%. I mean, we're talking back when megabytes were a big deal, and now we're on terabytes, and, it's unbelievable, the progress of technology.
Unbelievable. I mean, the camera you're filming these on is better than the first camera I made my first film with.
These cameras shoot 4K.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy.
In a cell phone. I literally have to downgrade it. I don't even shoot in 4K. I shoot in
you don't need 4K, and it's insane in the post-production process. But yeah, my first camera, when digital came out and I could shoot a documentary on digital versus film, it was a Canon X1S. It was a high-end camera, best one there was, and it shot 720 by 480. And I was, as a documentary filmmaker, over the moon because I had a long lens so I could get different focal lengths. I had control over all. It was a Canon. It was a beautiful camera. Still one of my favorite cameras ever as far as the ergonomics of it. But yeah, that was what I made my first film on, and that was absolutely acceptable, and that's what everybody was working on. And
now we have 8K available.
Yeah, now it's 8K, which is just bananas because nobody shoots 8K unless you need to see the pores of my skin.
Yeah.
Which nobody looks good in 8K anyway, so why the fuck are you shooting it? And then you clog up every computer trying to edit it. It's ridiculous.
100%. So let's wind the clock back to that world, to that existence. Times were different, politics were different. Everything just felt different. You're a young man that just gets out of high school. What's life like, and what direction are you pulled? Let's start to create the story of how we got to where we are now.
Cool. So to our pre-conversation, I'm going to talk about this both from that perspective and then from my perspective now.
No, I think that's great for the people listening.
Yeah, because 20-year-old Mike, 47, I'm 47 now, 47-year-old Mike has some wise words for 20-year-old Mike, but I absolutely remember what 20-year-old Mike was thinking. So, like everybody, there is that pull in your chest. that you don't know what it is, but it's there and it's pulling. My pull was always towards theater and things like that. That was where I was home. I did not play a lot of sports in high school. I did theater nonstop. That's all I did. I was backstage. I was on stage. That was my true love. That's what I wanted to do. And so that led me to want to be an actor. That's what I really thought I wanted to do, is to be an actor. So I moved to Chicago. I went to 1 year at Western Michigan for their scene design, because I was pretty good at building sets, but I didn't love that. And so I dropped out, moved to Chicago to be an actor. Those were probably some of the most formidable years, formidable and forming years of my life. Those really set the trajectory for me, and it was a wonderful experience, and I would highly recommend to anybody who's not particularly sure about going to college that don't give into the pressure of you have to go to college right away. You will definitely, when you're 26, 27 and your other people are making six-figure jobs and you're not yet, that will be a little bit of a sting, but knowing the path that you need to be on is way better than just jumping into the fire and getting sent, the arrow shot in whichever direction. But so I went to Chicago at 19, started bartending to make a living, but it was just an amazing time in my life. Probably the most free time I've ever had, because I'm 19 years old. I lied. I fixed back then, so we had birth certificates that you could literally just fake. So I took a pencil like I used to do when I would change my grades, and I erased the 3 on 1973 as the year I was born. I changed the 3 to I don't remember. No, I had to change it to 1960 something, because I had to look, because you had to be 21 years old to bartend in Chicago. So I lied about my birth certificate, got a job in downtown Chicago bartending. So then that gave me access to go into any bar I wanted to, because I would just go in with the whole wait staff. Nobody thought to card me. I'm making at that time, which was huge money, $200 a night. So I was just living this, gangster lifestyle, just making money, having a blast, getting introduced to all kinds of things that every 19-year-old should get introduced to at some point in their life. Survived it. But it really just gave me this thirst for, holy shit, this is what life can be. Not so much life can be drinking and bartending, but life can be this full. You can feel this full all the time, and that's probably the way I would describe Chicago. Is every day I was just full, and it was wonderful. That 19-year-old, I could take this fucking world by storm and do whatever I want. And these people running it don't know what the hell they're doing, and I'm alive. Let's flex
just
that.
a raging flame in your chest.
Yeah, let's just flex this alive muscle. And that's how everybody should be, and you should be given that time. And then as life does, it will eventually let you know that you are not that big of a deal and that it has other plans for you. But I hadn't gotten there yet, and so I wanted to be an actor, and I did all the things you're supposed to do, got an agent, started going on auditions, but acting was definitely not my highest priority. My highest priority was all of the fun that I was having. And I was having a lot of fun, which is fine. I wouldn't go back and change any of that. Got a couple jobs, Papa John's pizza commercials, different little acting jobs, which, they paid really well, so I was swinging dick and thought I was great. But then, after a couple years of that, I was like, okay, this acting thing really hasn't taken off. I should really start to try and get after it. And I got up, I auditioned for a movie called Primal Fear, which I don't know if you've ever seen.
Yeah.
And I got to the fourth or fifth call back, and I'm like, I'm killing this thing. This is mine. My first film, I'm gonna make it. And then I didn't get the part, and then I saw the movie, and I was like, oh, well, if that's what it takes to be in Hollywood. And Leonardo DiCaprio had just come out with What's Eating Gilbert Grape at that point too, and he's about the same age as me. And then I saw these guys, Ed Norton, saw Leonardo DiCaprio.
When you actually told me the story before, and you brought up Ed Norton. You said, I saw that gentleman on screen, and I was like, listen.
Not on my best day.
That's another level.
Not on my best day with my daddy's shoes would I ever been able to fucking compete with that. So I thought, okay, so I have the option to make Doritos commercials. You can literally make Doritos commercials for your whole life and be considered a successful actor, which was nothing that I wanted to do. I was full of life.
You wanted purpose.
I wanted purpose. I wanted to say something. And you can do that if you're an actor, if you're the 1%, if you're the Edward Norton, and if you're the Brad Pitt, if you're the Leonardo, you can have that voice. You can have that control. The other 9 million people trying to make as an actor are just trying to pay their bills. And that was a coming to Jesus moment for me, that I realized, okay, this is probably not the path that I'm going to find that voice in. And then at the same time, I saw the movie True Romance, which I couldn't believe what I watched when I watched the first time. I just pushed rewind and watched it again, and then rewind and watched it again. And I couldn't believe a movie took me on that journey. And that was Then I was off and running towards being a screenwriter, and then I realized screenwriters have no real power in the industry, so I needed to be a director. So that was it. I was off and running to be a director in the film world. Applied to NYU, USC, and North Carolina School of the Arts. USC accepted me, but I couldn't afford it. NYU didn't accept me, and then NCSA was available, and it was an up-and-coming. I knew about them from the days when I was a production designer. They're a phenomenal art school, so they had just opened a film school, went there, and then off and running to where I am now.
Let's look at it from the lens of the gentleman that sits here today, because you said, there's the gentleman that had that perspective back in the day, that was the 20-year-old kid that watched Edward Norton on screen and had these opportunities in front of him and said, hey, there's no way I can possibly do it. Does the same Ramsdell that sit here today, if you had gone back, do you still make the same choices? Or is there anything that you do any different? Are there certain perspectives that you have now that you would have told the younger Mike, like, hey, consider this?
Yes. And that's probably why I'm most valuable to be on this podcast, because otherwise, my career path is just basically my career path. There's interesting things to learn. But the thing that I think I can offer the most to, I train here, so most people are half my age or, somewhere around that. They're at that time in their life where they're making those decisions. And this gets to a bit of metaphysical conversation that we often get into, so it's not a bad thing. But I talked about that pull in your chest. And you have that pull and it's there, and you don't know what it is. And culturally speaking, and probably just from a species, we process everything through our mind. That pull we process through our mind, our experiences we process through our mind, our future we process through our mind, we imagine it in our mind. And our mind is an incredibly important tool to getting us to where we are, survival tool. Our mind does two things. It says, get the hell away from that and go towards that, in whatever way it wants to say it. Sometimes it says it nicely, sometimes it says it meanly, sometimes it says supportive, sometimes it makes you feel like shit, but that's its only two objectives. Get away from this, go towards this. And it does not matter. You'd be sitting on a pile of $1 million, and the only thing it's going to say is get more of this or get away from this. You can never satisfy the mind.
I love this, or I fear this, or this is bad.
This is bad.
Two roads.
This is good, this is bad. Now, when you're, a caveman in a fire and you see a brontosaurus, then obviously get the hell away from that is good. When you're starving and it's telling you go towards this, you need sugar, you need carbohydrates, that's good. So at that point in our life, it was essential. Ironically, it will also be the thing that I think eventually destroys us, but that's a different podcast, I suppose. But when you're 20-some years old, I didn't even know how to think like this. I had not been introduced to anything that even taught me to think like this. That's not what this culture talks about. This culture doesn't teach it. This culture doesn't even suggest that there is another part of life to experience through, to operate a different operating system.
Like a different perspective that you can take a step back and say, wait a second, I'm just kind of reacting right now. But if I can reflect on my thoughts and why am I doing what I'm doing? Why am I feeling? You're right. There's a whole science there that's not even tapped into.
It's not even tapped into. And understanding the mind, like a Tony Robbins kind of guy, where he's just trying to change the way your mind talks to you, which is great. Why, if you're going to be tied to this thing forever, have it
more affirmative.
Yeah, have it say nice things to you instead of mean things to you. But you're still just operating from your mind. And so if the mind has only two directions, away or go, that's it. Then when you look at something like a life choice, when you look at a career, you feel this pull, okay? I feel that pull lights me up more when I'm on stage. I know I want to do something with that. I want to tell stories. I want to be part of that. I want to make an impact on human existence. I love philosophy, so how can I integrate all those things? Okay, that's great. That's one thing. But then the mind takes that as its own and says, okay, if we want to do this, this is who we have to be. And culturally, the way we're taught is you look at who's doing it successfully, and you look at the characteristics they have, and then you do your best to try to emulate them. So, okay, so I need to be famous. Who's famous? Okay, well, at that time, Tom Cruise was the leading actor. Okay, I need to be Tom Cruise. So all the things that we think of that are benchmarks towards success, because obviously if you have this pull, you want to achieve it. Achieve and success are fairly interchangeable words. So how am I going to get to success? And so you look at the benchmarks that this culture dictates to success. The mind takes those, sets those as the flags, and then you are unconsciously off on a route that it is going to either support you or yell at you the whole way you're on. And you have done nothing other, literally, than imagine a life. Imagine a person that doesn't really exist, and again, that might be a different podcast, traveling a life path that doesn't really exist, and it's all happening in your mind, and your mind is going to be the only place that any of that actually takes place. And that caught me up for a significant amount of years. My entire 20s was spent chasing my mind. My 30s was the brick wall that I hit that my mind led me down. And I kind of had to unwind. I got divorced. I really had to reflect on my career. And, you know, my ex-wife, wonderful person, God bless her, whatever. We just weren't meant for each other. But my mind had different ideas. My mind said, this is what you have to do. My mind said, this is how you're going to be successful. My mind said, this is what good things are. But I was no longer listening to the pull. It had totally hijacked that pull and made it, and was just reflecting this movie on the screen of my mind. And this, the interesting thing about mind is that it'll have a thought and put it on that screen, and now you're looking at that screen. So now you're having a thought about what the image you were just given, and then you have that thought about that thought, and you're down this row of just fucking projections on a screen that never even existed in the first place. Nothing to do with what is. Nothing to do with what's right here. All just the mind. And again, that was important to get us to survive as we were running around the jungles and stuff. But it is wildly unproductive now.
But you're almost living in a delusion that you've created based on the initial feeling.
You are absolutely living in an illusion, illusion, based on that initial pull. And there is nothing in this culture. I mean, these conversations, like, that's one of the reasons why I love you, why I love this place, because you can have these conversations and you're not, you know, kind of like looked at out of the side of your eye. There's nothing in this culture. I have 3 kids now, and it is very hard for me to talk to them about them because I'm the only voice that brings this stuff up in their life. So it's just like, oh, yeah, Dad, you know, okay, whatever, I don't exist. Sit down, meditate, breathe in my nose, I get it, blah, blah, blah. But there's nothing to, at the time, because that's when you really start to come online, that 16 to 20 years old, you start to feel like I exist.
Passion fueled. I got to be something.
You become an autonomous being. Like, you're no longer just this malleable thing that kind of just goes with the current and that your parents tell you what to do and school tell you. Like, you recognize, like, wait, that guy doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about.
You can become more aware of just everything.
Of everything, including yourself. And the only tools that we have to reflect on that, because the mind is going to, that's what's happening, is the mind is, our frontal cortex really does not fully develop until our early 20s. So it's really coming on, and it only thinks in symbols, and it only thinks in survival, you know, yes, no. And so if that's the only tool with which we have to address this initial pull,
yeah, you're having like your limbic system, your emotional brain, your monkey brain, trying to analyze purpose and deep meaning to you, and that's an incredibly difficult process because you're not really reflecting in that. You're reacting, like you said.
You're 100%.
Yes, no, this is not pushing me towards being Edward Norton. The signs say this. I need to follow this. Which those are all illusions. I mean,
those are all illusions, and the biggest one, and I see this here all the time, and I'm not here to, you know. If people ask me a question, I'll answer it, but I'm not trying to get in anybody's life. The biggest one of that is, you're not fucking Ed Norton yet. You're not Ed Norton yet. You're failing. You're not Ed Norton yet. Look at Ed Norton. Look at all he's doing. You're not that yet. You suck. You failed. You aren't good enough. So you can literally be sitting anywhere and feel like a complete fucking failure because you're not the symbolic thing that your mind has attached as what success is based on that initial pull that the mind didn't create. The mind just hijacked it. That initial pull, that is the person you are. That is the essence. If I were to sit in the same place and not know who Ed Norton was and have the tools or take back my life from my mind, then I get to, as they say in Buddhism, be who you are becoming. As Nietzsche said, be who you are. It has nothing to do with the mind. And that would be the thing. I mean, it's almost impossible to, you can't head it off. Everybody has to walk their path. And you watch everybody going through it and you're like, yeah, I know where you're going, and yeah, it sucks right now, and it's going to continue to suck until you can break it, you know, until you realize that you're just chasing the illusion, it's going to suck. And I think that's necessary. I mean, I had to get my ass handed to me. My 30s were, for me, I mean, I'm not trying to whine about anything. Obviously, I've traveled the world enough to know how not hard my 30s were. But psychologically speaking, my 30s were fucking just brutal as far as beating me down.
Basically had to break you back to the initial start to build up again correctly because the illusions and the things that you had accepted weren't reality.
And you have to run into that wall. You have to run into because the initial instinct is, and especially in this culture, if you're failing, you're just not trying hard enough. You just got to try harder.
Work harder.
Work harder. Work harder. Do more. There's a new program out 10 times. And I was like, oh, what's this all about?
Yeah, 10X.
10X. Just do everything 10 times harder. Go faster, go faster. Like, if you're going in the wrong direction, you go 10 times faster, what's going to happen?
You're going 10 times further off track.
Off track. Like, shh. Just be quiet for a second. Listen, that's where you are. Just right there. Be there. And
You just hit on another big thing. We're so incredibly entertained and distracted, and there's so much thrown at us every single moment of every day. And the mind is like an intangible. You can't just lay it out on paper, put it all in front of you and say like, oh, wait a second, this is a distraction. That's not who I am. This came from this perspective. This doesn't tie into my purpose. This isn't me. You have all this room, but when do we ever have time to sit down and work on that process?
when we decide to.
Exactly.
When we decide to. But that's the thing, is this culture does not endorse that.
I don't think it's productive for a lot of the way that the system's set up, because if you get everybody sit back and reflect on their life, a lot of things have to change. You know what I mean? Everybody knows a lot's wrong.
Yeah, well, and that's kind of the shift, I think, culturally speaking, if we want to go into this, and I know neither one of us want to turn this into a political conversation, but culturally speaking, that the path I just talked about, where you go so far until you hit the wall, and that's where this country is, going towards right now. Like, it is just, there's no sustainable way to keep all of our main focal points are just pumping fear and divisiveness and all of that. Like, it can't stand.
There's barely lines of communication at this point. I can't even get people to talk about opposing,
No, and but why would they? Because if the leaders of every entity that you would expect to be doing it can't do it, we're not culturally trained for it. There's really no experience with it for a lot of people. And so do you get pissed at those people because they have no experience for kind of compassionate conversation? No. You get pissed at those people because the only thing they've ever seen is, all media outlets, all politicians, all corporations just shouting at them from every freaking mouthpiece they have. Either fear, mind stuff. Go this way, don't go this way. Go this way, don't go this way.
Good, bad.
Right,
and wrong.
And they figured it out a long time ago. I mean, hell, it's not a new algorithm that many people figured out a long time ago. If you just tap people into that mind and you speak in that way, this is all good, this is all bad, it takes you that long to hypnotize most of the majority. That's because that's what our brain,
it simplifies it. It makes it so much easier. Instead of having to process 60 million different ideas, you go, oh, yes, good, acceptable, right, bam, don't have to spend energy, bad, boom.
But that is, for a long time the younger Mike would have looked at people like that and be like, you're just fucking sheeple and you don't know what you're doing and just wake up. And
I went through the same stage.
And it's like, but wait a second. And that's where Anatomy of Hate was such a powerful thing in my life, is because it forced me to be involved with those people and then to empathize with them and realize, wait a second, there is nobody operating here with a different operating system than I have. And, my biggest epiphany was with a gentleman named Fred Phelps, who was the head of the Westboro Baptist Church, which was a much bigger organization, or a much more notorious organization 10 years ago than it is now. But basically their concept was God hates fags. They were a Baptist church that believed that God was punishing America because of its endorsement of homosexuals. And their main biblical scripture was Leviticus 18 or 19, I can't remember. It says, thou shalt not land with mankind as with womankind, is an abomination before God. So they go all around churches, military, everywhere, and protest, said, God hates you, God hates fags, God's going to kill America, and you should be thankful for that. And so obviously I vehemently disagreed with their position, but I was making a film, and as a filmmaker, responsible filmmaker, it's not about my opinion, it's about understanding, and through understanding, then we can, begin to build the bridges. So I spent a lot of time with the family, and Fred Phelps was the pastor. Incredibly powerful dude, personal power, 6'3", and I don't know how old he was when I met him, probably 75 or whatever, probably like 6'3", 6'4", maybe. An incredible vocabulary, like wildly intelligent, knew his biblical scripture. Nobody would compete with him in biblical scripture, and that's not my specialty, so I didn't even try. But he was just a powerhouse of it. Like when you sat in a room with him, you were like, you better bring your A game, because this man is a force of nature, just a thud in the middle of existence. And as he's articulating to me all of the reasons why he is simply doing the work of God. And now this is a man who in the 60s was a civil rights hero, because there is nothing in the Bible that supports racial divisions. Everybody's all a creature of God. So when he saw that was anti-God too. So he's using the Bible to do something that I believe in, which is support racial unity. And now he's using the Bible to something I don't believe in, which is drawing lines along sexuality. But he's giving me all the scripture, and he says, look, my job as a good Christian is to do the work of God. Now, if I was saying God hates murderers, they'll burn in hell, there would be nobody disagreeing with me. If he was saying God hates racists, there would be nobody disagreeing with me, because those are culture. But I'm not here to do what the culture wants. I'm here to do what God wants. And in Leviticus, and it does say it, God shall not lie with mankind.
I think it's like one sentence in the entire book.
Yeah, but it says it.
It says it,
and it says plenty that God will rain fire and
Bring
brimstone.
wrath.
Yeah, like, so there's some evidence that God can be a real bad dude if he wants to be. And it just, boom, right there clicked in my head that this man is operating from his position of faith against the culture, which is very hard to do, and a level of faith that I have yet ever to experience. I don't believe in anything, I think, that much.
His convictions were that strong.
Were that strong. And he was following them in a way that he absolutely thought was. And so when I took away my judgment on his convictions and just looked at what the man was doing, I had to empathize. I had to even respect to a certain degree that he cared that much about what he believed was right and wrong to take this much time in the face of a culture current that was degrading him and his family. Now, he was a massive egotist, so he loved all the attention, all that, and that was kind of his human flaws. But at the root of it, if I had agreed with his message like I did in the 60s, he would have been a cultural hero. But because I disagreed, because my judgment was different than his, now he was an enemy. And I thought, well, that right there is where this whole thing breaks down. Because I've just turned him into an enemy because I disagree with the things but I'm jumping right past all of the things that we have in common to go right to that point of disagreement. And that is how I'm casting all of my projections on him, which has nothing to do with him and everything to do with me. And that was the big, aha, that was a big aha moment for me that, I can't remember exactly what even got us started down Fred Phelps, but that I realized that the cultural currents and my judgments on them were not the right guiding force, that there was something that I had to get to that was deeper than just, and this was all during 9/11 and everything, and that's what really set this journey off on that film. Because, you were pretty young during 9/11, but...
Sixth grade math class, Miss Romberger, I still remember.
There you go. So I grew up between Vietnam and 9/11. And so those were my formidable years. Those were actually my years. So Vietnam was, the year, the war we all lost, that everybody protested, that everybody says we've got to learn our lessons, da-da-da-da-da-da. And so you hear all of this stuff about we've gotten better and, the embarrassment about the internment camps during World War II and how we need to come together as people, da-da-da-da. And then 9/11 happens, and then all of a sudden everybody's right back into the same thing. People who I wildly respected were like, we just need to nuke the Middle East or
wipe it all out, forget those people.
I don't want anybody to die, but if somebody has to die, it has to be them, not us. And I'm like, this is literally all the sentences that I grew up being taught that we were supposed to have learned from. And now the people who taught me those sentences are saying them. So what the F is happening here? And then it was like, okay, so that was my journey into anatomy of hate, was just trying to figure out what's the operating system that is superseding intellect. Because you can have intellectual conversations in a room all day long, but when shit hits the fan, there's another operating system that comes online. And that was my journey that's where I really started to get to know, that's what brings us back, is where I really started to see the mind. And that's what that is, and that's how that operates.
So the way that you're almost breaking this down, it's like people develop a filter through which all the information in their life starts to come through, or the mind creates an illusion and it starts to filter everything through that. It might not even connect to who we really are and what we really are, but there's a filter now that's in place. This is obviously comes from culture, it comes from your environment, it comes from the people around you, it comes from the influence that you have. What made you make that switch? Was it the really difficult times in your life when you describe your 30s? Like, what made you go from the young man that is filled with illusions, that probably is filled with a lot of passion, and there's a lot of misdirection, a lot of mistakes, a lot of things you're proud of, a lot of things you're not proud of, but what actually makes the snap to start creating the man that you are today? Like, I'm always fascinated by shifts. You know what I mean? When someone can shift from one thing to the other, because like you said, this isn't a taught process. Right. Unless you seek it, it's very hard to find it.
Right.
So what created that shift? Because the man that you're, like the way you're speaking now, you probably couldn't even have communicated with your young self.
I had no idea.
There's a complete separation there. You wouldn't be on the same frequency. The words would come in, but they wouldn't have meaning. What made that shift take place? Because maybe there's something to be learned from there about how we can begin to get people to cut the illusions a little bit, to get back to being people more.
Well, I would love to say there was one shift. There wasn't, and I'm still going through them, and I still battle with my mind all the time. But... we talked about that pull. I think that is, at the end of the day, that pull is that is who you are, and it's gonna have its experience. You either embrace that and go on that journey of who you are, or you fight against it, and we see the consequences of that.
I mean, and yeah, if you're fighting against who you really are, the idea for finding fulfillment or, real, true passion and love in this life is an extremely difficult prospect because you're fighting against that core of who you are as a human being that wants something, that desires some things. And it might not even want any certain thing, but it wants to live in a certain way. It wants to show itself to the world in a certain light.
It is an expression, to show itself in a certain light. That is it. So the phrase "be who you're becoming," like that's my centering point. Be what you're becoming is what the phrase is actually, and I think that this is going to be kind of a long way around to answering the question that you asked me, but I think it's the best way to approach it. In that question or in that statement, there is the identification of almost a bifurcation of existence. That there is the be, and then there is the becoming. One is an active verb, and one is a settled verb. And that is the great irony of life, is that the essence of us, what we are, the thing that lasts beyond James Gray, that was there before James Gray, that James Gray is just wrapped around. It has nowhere to go. There's nothing for it to do. It just is. It will always be. It will never go away. It is no more important than the smallest blade of grass and no less important than the entire universe. It just is forever in existence. And then it's expressing itself through James Gray right now. James Gray is literally an expression of it. And through that, in between that maybe, we have this thing called mind. That essence is wildly attracted to. It's like a sexy dancer. I consider it like news talk radio. Like you just can't turn that shit off. And so you start to think that news talk radio is really life. Like no matter what the fuck it's saying it in the right ways that you're like, you just can't look away from it.
It's compelling, extremely.
It's compelling. It's danger, excitement, go here, don't go there. You're like, you just can't turn it off.
It hits those emotional chords. Right. You're just locked in.
But then if you turn it off, all right, so let's say this. So then you turn it off and you go sit by a river. Now the average American is going to get by that river for about 30 seconds before they're going to get antsy, before they're going to want to check their phone, before they're going to want to move around, scratch. Oh, my hips hurt. I got to get up. I got to move around. What's so-and-so doing? Oh, shit, did I take the dog out? Da-da-da. So all that is just mind. But if you can sit there long enough and you can start to hear something else, feel something else, go towards that. That is you. And that is a hell of a journey to get out of this mind and into that. But for me, I've been, I would say, very blessed in the fact that pull has always been loud enough that it hasn't gotten lost. Now, no, that's a lie. It's definitely gotten lost. But it's always...
You've been able to find it again.
Yes.
Once you've lost it, you've been able to somehow relocate it.
It came back and knocked on my shoulder and was like, hey, dude, I'm still here. Like, oh, God, I totally forgot about you. I'm so sorry. Let me get back to it. And I can tell you, like, there are specific massive shifts that have happened in my life that I can remember the specific moment. But the overall journey, those years that I talk about that it was lost, it was never lost. I mean, you can't lose.
You're just disconnected from it.
Yeah, you can't lose is. It doesn't get lost. It just is. Whether I was paying attention to it, aware of it, or mentally lost in my trap of my mind, or as the Buddhists would say, samsara. Yeah, it doesn't mean that I wasn't is. It just means that I wasn't aware of my isness until, then there was a bunch of different steps that happened, but, I don't think she'll listen to this, but I have no problem showing how bad decisions are as important as good decisions. I got married to a girl that when I met when I was 14 years old.
Wow.
And she was, I saw her and I could tell you the moment that I saw her, I was like, oh my God, she's so beautiful. And so I wrote this whole story about who this woman was. Then at 27, we reconnected and I went on a date with her. Now, I've had 13 years to write a story about who this woman is.
You already know who she is. You know everything about her.
In my mind, I did.
Exactly. You have an illusion of this person that exists and you know exactly what she is.
And now, again, I'll say this again. She's a wonderful woman. But I wrote a whole fucking story about her that had nothing to do with who she is. And I was so trying to run from my own fears that the idea of, okay, now I'm going to come into this relationship. I'm going to fix her, meaning all of the things that I thought that she could have a better life if she just listened to me on.
Make her match your story.
You make her match my
You're
story.
this person.
And make me match my story because I'm now this guy who came in and made someone's life better and I'm this knight in shining armor and look at me and aren't I important? And this whole story. And believe it or not, it didn't work out.
Shocking.
Like with all those as the grounding, you can't imagine how it wasn't a happily ever after. I was trying to jam a round peg into a square hole for 12 years. And I mean, the only way I can look back at that is just to laugh a little bit. I mean, it gave me 3 wonderful children. And again, her and I are closer now than we've ever been. And her and my wife, Virginia, are very good friends. And everything is wonderful. So I have zero begrudging. But it took me until I remember I used to go like sit in a park and meditate while I was walking the dogs because I was so wrapped up. And, I care. And so I wanted my marriage to be good. And I came from a family of good marriages. And I wanted her to be happy. And I wanted me to be happy. And
what's wrong with me? What's wrong with
her?
Me?
What can I do better? What can she do better? Fuck, I'm Mike Ramsdell. I'm not supposed to be in a bad marriage. I'm supposed to be, da-da-da. And it wasn't until there was one day I was sitting on a rock and I reframed the question of, why is she always doing this? Why is she always doing this? And I reframed the question of, well, why did you marry her? And I don't even know if I asked the question. The question came from within. Why did you marry her, Mike? Because it's not like she changed. It's not like one day we were happy and the next day she just decided to do something different. She was always who she was.
Yeah, she's who she is.
And that question alone sent me on a massive journey to answer the question, why the fuck did I marry her? Like, we had differences to go with. And I had to come to terms. I married her, again, her wonderfulness aside, I was trying to create a story that I was trying to live a story that my mind had created.
You married that story.
I married the story.
You said, I'll fix what it takes to get that story, but this is my story and this is what I'm acquiring.
And I was trying to dress what the mind does is it tries to, the Western culture, this is where it's really ironic. Western culture is all about gathering. And so either unconsciously or consciously, we're always trying to gather things, pins and medals we can put on our imaginary persona. Like Mike Ramsdell did this. Mike Ramsdell did this. Yay, Mike Ramsdell, you did this. Yeah, I'm better because I did this. And the journey we're talking about is all about the backward step. Is all about that's not who I am. Walk away from it. And you almost step backwards into yourself. As opposed to in Western culture, you're always just trying to go out and dress yourself with enough illusions, as Jesus said, the man, wise man built his house upon the rocks, the foundation of who you are, as opposed to the sand, the illusion of what you are. And that's what I was doing. I was trying to build an entire life on this narrative that I had written. And that was 12 years of my life. Now, again, I would never take them back because she's wonderful. My children are wonderful. I wouldn't be where I am without going it. But I needed those 12 years. And it's laughable in one degree, and then just like, are you fucking kidding me? I needed 12 years to just simply make that adjustment in my head that it wasn't about what she was doing. It was about what was I doing. And that wasn't the biggest shift in my life, but it was a massive lesson. I would say I was probably 38 when that question hit my head. And so and then that changed a massive direction in my life, really reaffirmed. And I think I had probably processed it before then because I'd made Anatomy of Hate. So I'd made a lot of big leaps in who I was. But it really was just a hammer of anything that is not working in your life, you have to find the answer within. You have to look within. It is 100%, this life exists. This is only a projection of what's here. And if this is not working, then the only answer for it is here. And again, can you think of a more foreign thing in a Western culture? Like, what is this country? If it's not working for you, you got to work harder. You got to change it. You got to beat them. You got to get it. You fucking get them out of the way. Blow through that wall. Shh, quiet.
Pump the brakes.
Sit by the river. Wait till you hear what you hear. When you're there, then once you hear that voice, then you can start to then you can do while being. We do very little being, we do all doing in this culture. And like we said, when you're going in the wrong direction, no matter what you do, you're only digging that hole in the wrong direction that much deeper.
Man, that was extremely powerful. And it just opened my mind into a completely new topic of our stories are so deeply attached to our meaning or our purpose or what we think we desire. You know what I mean? So whatever story you create, your brain is telling you, like you said, I must get to this, or this person is this is this. I must achieve this or else that. That almost gets to the dilemma of how do we start recreating stories that are closer to to the actual being of who we are and what we want. Because right now, I mean, what you just addressed is the exact same thing that could describe the political climate that we don't really want to get into. Is people have a story in their mind before they even look into anything or want to break down information. They've created a story about who one person is, what another person is, what this person stands for, what that person. If you support this, you must be that. We've already made all the. We've taken the work out of it. Yeah. We've taken the work out. I know who you are before you talk to me. This is what you are. This is the type of human being you are. You're less than me. You're greater than me. You're whatever it is. With so much unbelievable information pounding us every single day in sources, how in the world do you get people to get back to just not even recreating the story, just looking at the story that they're living in? I think it actually comes back to what you were just saying, is slowing down, taking a step back. Probably 4 years ago or 3.5 years ago, I took Stacy to one of those flotation tanks.
Oh, yeah.
You know, those isolation tanks. And I had no expectations going in, but I was like, I'm just going to go in this tank. I liked my mind to really try to delve into things anyway. And I had no idea what to expect. So I'm like, I'm going to just be quiet, see what comes up. You know what I mean? Who knows where this is going to take me? Right. And right before it finished, a 90-minute session, I came down to the simplest, most profound thought ever. That, even the last couple of years, like I've been a passionate man for a long time, but I've gotten way better at everything that I do. I'm more efficient. I'm more dialed in. I know really what lights me up in my heart. I know, like I've found deeper meaning. Like I have a even better level of fulfillment than I felt before. And I came down to this simple sentence that was like, when I cut out all of the bullshit, all I am is like what I believe myself to be. And what I mean by that is, so many times you get, well, I'm this person, I'm important because of this, I accomplished this, I won this tournament, I did that, I'm this person, I'm an owner, I'm this. All it was I get to live this life the way that I am on the core if I express that. So like I'm trying to make the sentence make relative sense to you. I just got down to the idea that all I am is what I believe myself to be at the bottom level. And if I can figure out what that is, what I desire and what I want, and start to really strengthen that foundation, I feel like I have a stronger filter for everything that tries to come in and get me off the course. Does that make sense?
100%.
Like I started to connect so deeply at however you want, like you were using like core or essence. And it's funny because when I speak to people, I try to use the same terminology and I can't put a word to like, we've tried to use like the word consciousness before. Whatever you are, beyond any of it, doesn't even matter how you classify it. Whatever you are, right? The closer you can get to like really strengthening that foundation and supporting that like deep feeling in your chest, as you've referred to it, the more you can almost block all the chaos. And the chaos doesn't, rip you down this path or that path. You got people that are living life that are champion causes that mean nothing to them. But they're slaves almost, or soldiers of a calling, or they're in complete support of a person or a message or a movement that is not them at all. Well, do you understand what I'm trying 100%. To say? It's so hard to articulate this correctly, but it's like I was able to find within myself really what I am on a deeper level. And I'm sure that journey is going to go further and further. But all of a sudden, the world changed to me.
And that's
again, I started going like, things just didn't permeate. Right. Does that make sense?
100%. And I think you articulated it beautifully. When we talk about it as human beings, I think it gets a little messy. But the analogy I use to really kind of bring it to life is a wave in the ocean. So first of all, you imagine a wave in the ocean, and once it becomes a wave, somebody whispers in its ear, hey, you're a wave. I'm a what? You're a wave. Oh shit. Okay, what's a wave supposed to be? And then so you go through that whole learning process. Okay, I'm supposed to do this, I'm supposed to do this. And then the wave develops a mind. And this is the moment in the Bible when God asks Adam, who told you you're naked? Who told you you're a wave? I'm a wave. Okay, you're a wave.
And I'm different than that wave, and I'm special.
But wait a second, I'm a wave. And eventually waves crash, and they don't exist anymore. Holy shit. So if I'm going to be a wave, and he's a wave, and this whole ocean is full of waves, well, then I got to be the best wave.
I stand out.
What
makes me the best wave?
Maybe I can be the biggest wave. Oh, I can't be the biggest wave because he's the biggest wave. Well, then I got to be the most powerful wave. But wait, I don't know if I can be the most powerful wave because I don't have the same ocean currents. Well, then I gotta do that. Whatever, I gotta be the richest wave. I mean, now we can take it into the humans.
Now you're in a constant state of comparison.
It's constant state of trying to be.
Yeah.
Not trying to be, to trying to do. to trying to, what can I put on this? How can I as a wave, because now this is the key thing. The wave is not the wave.
It's the ocean.
It's the ocean, but it doesn't know it's the ocean.
It subjectively views itself as a wave, probably because it was told to be a wave.
Because it was told it was a wave. But now think about it. If you're told you're a wave, but you're actually the ocean, of course you're fucking terrified. What am I? I'm a wave. What the fuck is a wave?
What am I supposed to do?
What am I supposed to do?
Am I bigger, taller, shorter?
Yeah, you're supposed to do this. Okay, but all these guys are doing this and they're doing it better than me. God, I won't mean anything. I'm going to fall. I'm going to crash onto the shore and I'm not going to mean anything. My life's not going to count and it doesn't matter and I'm scared and I don't know how to unbe. I'm scared. You're not a wave. You're the ocean. I just want to be the ocean. You are the ocean. I just want to be the ocean. If I could just feel like I was the ocean, then I would be fine. You're the ocean. No, and I'm not the ocean. I'm a wave. You're the ocean. I feel like I might be the ocean. Holy shit.
You're almost unwinding the chaos that has come in after.
I am the ocean in the form of a wave. And I'm going to ride out, and I'm going to crash on the shore, and then maybe I'm going to be another wave. And look at how beautiful that wave is over there. And look at him. Good job over there, other wave. High five, wave. Look, we're already crashing into each other, waves. Oh, and look, a bird just landed on me. Isn't that awesome? And there's a boat. It changes everything completely. When you stop thinking you're the wave and you realize you're the ocean, you're still the wave. You're just the ocean forming itself as the wave, which eliminates the fear like that, which eliminates there's nothing to do. Once you realize you're the wave, you can't control which direction you're going. It's all illusion. You know which direction. And the wave is going because it's being set on forces far bigger than itself, and it really had no control to begin with. It didn't form itself. Did you make yourself, James Gray? Did I make myself, Mike Ramsdell? I was formed, and then I was told I was a human, and then I was told this is what you're supposed to do as a human. And this entire pull that has been my chest is the desire to be what I really am, which is far bigger than a human, but because of all this noise and cacophony and Western culture and indoctrination and all of that, I have no clue to even listen to that, let alone when I hear it to go towards it, let alone the skill, the time, the patience. I mean, it's not easy for the wave to recognize it's an ocean. Some people are born closer to it than others. That's the journey, regardless of what you want to be doing. Everybody's on that journey. But to be unconscious of it, to live in a culture that doesn't support it, it is zero surprise that this country looks the way that it does. And so, to your point, I think what you're articulating beautifully is that you heard maybe for the first time, maybe the most powerful time, whatever it was, obviously an impressionable time, either your mind, and this is what's interesting, either the mind recognized it or what's underneath came up and talked to the mind. I don't know which one. There was a famous spiritual leader in India named Ramdell Maharishi, and he said that the mind is the tool. It's like the stick you use to turn the fire. That eventually you're going to use that stick and it's going to burn down until you just throw it in the fire. So our essence is the fire, and our mind is the stick that we just eventually have to continue to use to get back to it, which is kind of an ironic setup. Like, if ever I get a chance to meet God and be like, I'm not quite sure about the design you had here, but interesting, good joke.
It was a wild ride.
It was a wild ride. Good joke. You hid things, he hid things literally. Where did you hide God in heaven and me? In you. Where'd you look for it? Shit.
Externally.
Yeah. Everywhere but in me. Kingdom of heaven is within, all that kind of stuff. It's not new. It's just really, again, I give a lot of people, and I used to be the 19-year-old Mike Ramsdell that was so judgmental and so, you fucking people don't know what you're doing, and then somebody hands you the ball and you run right into the wall just as hard as they ever did. And you're like, this thing is kind of tricky. So maybe not only do I deserve a break for running into that wall, but maybe everybody gets a break for running into the wall. And so as opposed to judging everybody for running into the walls, how about we just empathize with the fact that the one thing that unites all of us, at least most of the time, is fear. There is an unconscious fear in everybody, whether you read Jung, whether you read Kierkegaard, whoever you're going to read that talks about how we address that fear. Ernest Becker is one of my favorites. I talked about him a lot. And so we take that fear and we try to just put all the stuff that makes us feel more immortal, more socially important, and hopefully that'll dissipate that fear. And it doesn't.
No.
And it tells
you're just covering it.
You're just covering it. You're just eating Twinkies.
Or it's over here and you're looking this way.
Yeah.
Hey, these things make me better.
Yeah, just continue trying to distract yourself. This is where the filmmaking journey is so wonderful for me, because the last film I made, I don't know if you had a chance to see it, it's called Set Apart, the Jim Abbott story. So Jim Abbott was born without a formed right hand. Obviously a fairly significant thing in one's life. So he grew up a couple blocks away from me, actually, in Flint. And as a kid, he was picked on his whole life, you have one hand, but he was always a very good athlete, and he could throw really well. So he loved sports. And so his thing was, if I do well enough at sports, then I can get people to quit thinking of me as the one-handed kid, right? So all the way up through high school, he becomes, the star pitcher of the baseball team, the star hitter of the baseball team, quarterbacks the football team, to the state championship. He gets drafted by the Toronto Blue Jays, says, I'm going to go play college ball, goes to University of Michigan, wins the Sullivan Award, pitches in Cuba, carries the American flag in the Pan Am Games, is the pitcher on the mound for the 7th game win of the U.S. in the first Olympic baseball game, wins the gold medal, goes on to California Angels, 3rd runner-up in the Cy Young, 2nd runner-up in the Cy Young, throws a fucking no-hitter in Yankee Stadium. I mean, an unbelievable career. 2 hands, 1 hand, whoever you are, unbelievable career. But the entire time he is completely unhappy because all he's trying to do is outrun this notion of being one-handed Jim.
Am I not good enough because I was like this?
And of course, the more success he has just leads to the more perpetuation of it, because everybody's writing headlines, one-handed pitcher, Jim Abbott throws no header, one-handed pitcher, one-handed pitcher. So he's literally running into it every single moment until he finally stops and realizes that this has been the gift and not the curse. That the pull,
it's been part of my power. It's why I am who I am.
Yeah, it's that when he quits fighting against life and surrenders to what it is and where he is and who he is in it, does he finally get to realize what a blessing he has, that life is. And there are those moments when, if you're quiet enough and if you sit by the river, where the world comes and surrounds you and envelops you and gets in you, and where it's hard to tell where you stop and the rest of the world begins. And again, in Buddhism, the phrase is an intimacy with the 10,000 things, and you realize that there is absolutely, your motto is we are all one. At a metaphysical level, they've proven, or at a physical level, they've proven that. But when you can get to that quiet space, that is absolutely the truth. And then the notion that I have to be a better version of me becomes so ridiculous that you can only laugh at it. You can only laugh at the idea that I was actually trying to improve me.
You just have to be you, but really you.
Yeah.
Not you that you think you have to be.
I am. How could I be better than I am? How could I can express the I amness.
You know what? Really just living to then find true happiness, like engage in your moments, engage in your relationships, envelop yourself in what fuels that deep feeling in your gut.
But this.
But you got to separate that from what if it's something that's just running from a fear.
Right, but then this is where the real trick is that takes us all the way back to your original question, is that the mind will never get you there.
Yeah,
the
that
mind
makes sense.
Absolutely
is wired to not.
It's incapable of it. It's only capable of recognizing what's right or what's wrong. And by right means, what do I need more of? Not like, cool, stay here, this is good. It means go get more of this.
What you're describing in a weird way is almost like right at that time of childhood when you have so much innocence and life is just play. Do you remember we probably can't even really remember that stage of our life, but when life is just you're thrown in this magical experience and life is just play, right? It's just, hey, I am, and we go here, and now today is the.
I have kids, so luckily I am thrown back into that experience all the time.
You're almost kind of unwiring the chaos that so many adults encounter, where I'm not good enough here, there's stress here, I'm fearful of this, what if I lose that? People look at me this way. You're almost shifting back, as funny as it sounds, to that early mindset that we had before the fears consumed. You know what I mean? Because people are absolutely controlled by fear. We witness it every single day. But when you're a child, at some point, although there's still, I'm sure, fears, don't do this, don't do that, you're working back towards that mindset of there's a freedom to this existence and this life, that if we can get closer to that and less controlled by our limbic system to, I must achieve this, I have to become this guy, this person thinks this, I have to do this. Like you said, you just told the most incredible story ever about Jim Abbott, and yet he's enveloped by misery throughout the process because
he wasn't good enough. I haven't achieved it yet.
That's mind-blowing.
It is.
And actually, Michael Jordan is probably someone similar, because during acceptance speeches, when he's getting awards for being the greatest ever, he's complaining about people that, well, this person thought that da-da-da-da.
You get trapped in it. And that is the thing about the mind, is that you can never be happy.
Yeah, the mind is almost designed in a way to not give you that happiness, because what if you achieve it? What now?
But there is no finish line for the mind. There is literally no finish line for you. Think of I mean, we can.
Tyson Fury did a long podcast, though, that I listened to that I was really fascinated by, where he said his entire life he had the goal to beat Klitschko. It's his only goal. He just wanted to be the guy that beat Klitschko. He was the heavyweight. One time he was in a sauna with him, and he was obsessed. Well, he's like, I will not leave this sauna until he leaves. Because Klitschko was known that, if he was in the sauna with you, he would never get out before you. It was his way of showing, and Tyson talks about, I was willing to die in that sauna, but he left before me. And that was a little victory. And all of his life's goal was I'm going to become the world champion. I'm going to beat that guy. Nothing else in his life mattered to him. But then he accomplished that, and he said he actually fell into the worst depression, the worst stage of his life, because that was supposed to be it. That was the pursuit. To him, his mind had told him, you're not good enough now, but if you were to achieve this thing, you're going to be. And then he fell into depression.
Because the void's still not full. Because the mind is built on a hollow ground. It's built on sand.
That's a wild thing to consider. You know what I mean? Because we're driven by that little voice that tells us it's at this level. Once you get that,
we are,
but there's something beyond it.
And that is the riddle that you asked me earlier. What was the shift? And the only thing I can say, and again, I am by no means an enlightened human being who has broken through his mind and I see my mind now, and I can hear it, and I can differentiate that voice versus the other voices. But that is until you even recognize that it is your mind talking, there's no way you can separate from it.
It's wild because are you reflecting from your mind is then analyzing your mind? You know what I mean? Your mind is all of a sudden becoming aware of its own self-destructive behavior, or are you slowly beginning to tap into something beyond the mind where you start to recognize yourself from such a wider perspective of you as a functioning human being?
You as a functioning entity.
That's what I would say.
Yeah. The human being element of it is where the mind comes in.
It wants to be different than everything else. It wants to have. That's where meaning comes from. I'm special. You know what I mean?
So let's cut the mind a little slack because it was a useful tool. But the two ways that we survive as humans, you throw us out in the middle of this place called Earth before all this infrastructure existed, and we're not particularly strong. We're not particularly fast. We wouldn't stand much chance against the bigger, larger predators that want to eat us. So the only way we could really survive is to form social groups. And then you form a social group, and the only way really to survive in that social group is to be of worth to that social group. That's what you have to do. And now these are 20, back in the tribes are 20, 30 people at most. And then they get that big and they split and they become different tribes. So if your mind's job is to keep you alive, then it has two things: physical fear, but then there's also that social status, that social form that we as human beings are more, and primates are more dependent on than other creatures. Now, I'm by no means a biologist, so I don't want to say too much, but we have to, if I'm going to be in a tribe, I have to be of worth to it. If I want to acquire certain things, I have to be a certain member of that tribe. So the mind was a phenomenal tool for that. Don't go in that fire. You're going to get burned. You're not, holding your end. You're not looked at by your peers as enough, so you might get kicked out of this tribe. You might get thrown off the cliff. You might be the guy who has to go fight the brontosaurus. You want to be different. So it's absolutely, but now that we can survive, it is I don't want to say a completely useless tool, but the way that I would phrase it is that there is, I'm going to call it the big I and then the little I. The little I is our mind. The big I is that essence, that thing that is forever, that is just manifesting as James Gray's Mike Ramsdell right now. We put in this culture, most people in all cultures, but as human beings, but in this culture specifically, we take that big I and we wrap it in the little I, and the little I runs the life, and the big I is just this thing in there. And my objective now is to live my life so that I'm operating from the big I, and the little I is just part of it. I'm going to need my mind to understand. It's a self-orienting thing. I need to know when you say, hey, Mike, can you come up here at this time to do this podcast? I have to know who Mike is. I have to know where here is. I have to know what time is. I have to know all that stuff. So that's it. And then I have to know what we're going to talk about, basic relationship between us. I can't just be we are all one and I'm here and you're there, but it's all one thing. That would be totally ineffective for me being here to do this. So there has to be a functioning. But when it rules the day, when it is the primary operating system and you fully believe that that is actually who you are and that is what's driving the car, then you can never, it will say, let's go to Florida. You get to Florida and it's going to say, you know what, I heard Bermuda's beautiful. Let's get to Bermuda. Okay, let's go to Bermuda. Okay, you know what, Bermuda's not as nice as we thought. We better go over to Japan. Oh, fuck, the East sucks. I hate sushi. Okay, we got to go. You're just never going to be because it can't do that. It cannot do that. You can't train it to do that. You can train it to say nicer things to you, like Tony Robbins teaches it to do, but you can't tell it to not do that because that's all it does. It's like telling your heart not to beat. It only knows to do that. So it is up to you to use your intellectual thought to look at those reflections of the mind. And then that's where things like meditation and everything comes from. Meditation is not some spiritual nonsense where you just do it so you can, win an award for being a meditator. Meditation is literally the practice of sitting down. Sitting, because you're not moving, you're not doing, stop doing, put your body in a position where your energy can flow properly. Recognize, the first step is just recognize what is this mind thing that I'm not supposed to be listening to. And if you sit there, you're going to hear it. It's playing drums and screaming and telling you to go get lunch and did you do this? And you're like, oh, okay, those are thoughts in my head. I can hear it. But what's hearing those thoughts? Oh, something's hearing those thoughts, so that means there must be something other than those thoughts. What is that thing other than those thoughts? Then you try to find that. Then usually what happens is you try to find that. You go, did I find it yet? Where's that thing? Because then the mind jumps in and it wants that. Okay, let's go find it. Yeah, let's do it. And then it starts to, you're like, no, I don't need you here. And if you can first you have to find what it is. Then you have to start to walk away from it. Take the backward step into whatever that other thing is. And that other thing, it's impossible to explain, it's impossible to describe, but that's where you are. That's where the idea of being a better version of you is just a laughable thing because it becomes abundantly clear that there is no you to begin with, that it is all just God or consciousness or awareness or what it is. I am not an awakened being by any means, but I have definitely had my profound moments of awakening. And actually I had one not too long ago. I was standing outside my garage smoking a cigar. It's kind of raining out. My kids are inside playing games. Virginia's in the house with the dogs. And I was having one of my conversations with myself, and I this started to well up, and I was like, and I asked myself, I don't even know if I did it out loud, but I was like, am I waking up finally? Because I've been on this pursuit for a while. And again, the voice, who knows where it came from, me, not me, I don't know, said, no, it's consciousness. And everything just lit up inside me. And my first reaction was literally to start laughing because I was fully connected, fully aware, fully awake, and the idea that Mike Ramsdell was out there looking to try to become consciousness was so ridiculous, and the fact that I had spent the last 20 years trying to do that was the only thing I could do was laugh because it was so clear that Mike Ramsdell is conscious, that there is nothing other than consciousness for Mike Ramsdell to be. There can't be a Mike Ramsdell. There can be a manifestation of consciousness in the form of Mike Ramsdell, but who the fuck did I think I was that I was, like, how can you take clay and make little balls of clay and those clay not be made out of clay? You can't, if all there is clay, then all you are is clay. If all there is consciousness, then of course you're consciousness. Why would you think you're not consciousness?
So think about what you just hit, because I was leading down the road of, I was going to ask you, like, what is the ultimate goal? But the funny thing is the ultimate goal is the beginning. It's just, it's a closed circuit.
It's to stop being, it's to stop doing,
it's
and
to
just
stop
be.
searching. It's to stop trying to find something that you think you're not, that you're searching for, because at the end of the day, it's going to come all the way back around. You're going to go, wait a second, I just am.
The kingdom of heaven is within. It is not fucking mystical
With all
language.
Men.
It is not mystical language. It is literally the truth. And and that's why it's laughable, because when you stumble upon it. Now, I knew as soon as I hit it, it lasted actually longer than most do. And I felt pretty good that night, and and it's funny because when I came inside, I wasn't going to talk to anybody about it, but I was still just lit up.
Feeling it.
Fully lit up. And so I have two dogs, a pit bull and a Rottweiler. The Rottweiler saw it immediately. She was like, and came running up to me and was just all over me, and nobody else saw it. And it was a wonderful night. We had a wonderful night together, but I was at that point just connected. The idea of course I love my children, but the idea of loving anybody less than I love my children, it's like, but we are all literally an expression. That tree right there, that I never got to the point where I could look at like an inanimate object and see that as the face of God. Or consciousness or whatever, which when you reach when you fully wake up, I think, from what I've heard and from everybody that I know that's the experience, is that and it makes sense intellectually. I didn't embody that by any means, so I obviously still have further to go on my journey, but it was a wonderful, beautiful perspective of just a laughable idea that I could do anything better, do anything to make me better than I am. It's like the wave thinking that it could do anything. How can I make myself a better wave? Like if you were to talk to that wave, if that wave came up and said, James, I really want to be the best wave I can be. Like your first reaction would probably be to laugh at it, but you wouldn't want to insult it. So you wouldn't, and you would say, well, let's talk about it. But it's just a laughable thing.
Yeah, what makes you a great wave? What do you think? Well, I saw this as that. Yeah, no, you're right. You're going on a pursuit that you almost don't need to go down. But now that almost takes us down to a problem that, do you believe that in some way the ego or the part of your brain that tells you to go accomplish things might be a positive driving force to make people be productive? Because you're almost getting to a level where it's like, I should just exist and float through each experience, because if you could separate all that desire for personal growth or things that we're told we're supposed to do, like personal growth, be more on time, be a better this, and this, make sure you do your dishes every night, because these are things that, we relate to, like, okay, this makes me better. If you got to the point where you took out all of that driving force that comes a lot from the ego and the mind, what does that life look like? Maybe that is more beautiful. Maybe that is just everybody in a playground together in a life experience where when we value each other to a level of like, we're all the same thing, there's a level of like, because with our combined intellect between the two of us, if we had the resources, we could fix so many of the world's problems, and yet they all still exist. If you had a wide group of people that all recognize that this is a connected experience and we need to better the entire existence across the board, we could easily do this. But we're stuck in this pursuit of like mine, possession, give me, I'm better, I am this,
you.
Status, external, internal. You know what I mean? But if you were to cut every layer off the problem and got back to the actual base level, what does that look like? You don't understand what I'm saying?
I 100% understand what you're saying. And honestly, that's been my biggest dilemma of letting go, because I've been on this journey for a while, like I said. And my first real dilemma of letting go was that I was so driven to be a filmmaker. I was like, well, if I let go and just surrender into that isness, then I might not want to be a filmmaker. And I've dedicated my whole life, and that's my social status. That's all the unconscious things it was. So I was like, well, I can't do that. And then I had kids, and I was like, well, I can't let go because I can't just, not pay for my children's life or not be a responsible father. And so that has been, you are tapping into a question I'm actually still struggling with, but one that I feel like I finally, when I meditate, I can believe in, is that the illusion is that when you let go of the mind, that you'll just be this void of faceless monkness that's going to go sit on a mountaintop and feel the rain on your shoulders and blah, blah, blah. And that's not reality. The reality is that your truth still wants to express itself. The truth can't not express itself. You were built as a truth-expressing machine. You're just not expressing your truth. You're just expressing your mind. And I don't mean you personally. I mean as much me as I mean anybody else in the world. And so the expression of truth is not the death of doing, not the death of desire, is not the death of enjoyment, engagement. It's just from a truthful place. And that to me is still one of the hardest things to let go of, is because the great illusion, the great trap of the mind is that it gives you control, that you are in control of this. And if you just listen to me, I can get you over
or an illusion of control, for sure.
That's 100% the illusion of control. You are no better at getting over the top of that mountain with using your mind as the guide as using your isness as the guide. Probably even less equipped to do such. The mind is good for doing certain things, but the mind is just a manifestation of isness too. It's not like the mind is something that just got kind of programmed into us out of nowhere. Everything is out of this essence. And so it exists too. So that has been my struggle. It's like, okay, well, if I just surrender, the Buddha left his wife and kids and went and sat and, wandered the earth, and that's how he became the Buddha. I can't fucking go sit under a Bodhi tree. I got a mortgage to pay. I got a job to do. So I'm very good Buddha for you, but I got to be Mike Ramsdell right now. And you do have to do that. But here's the thing, is I want to do all that stuff. That when I was in that moment of, I'm going to call connectedness, awakeness, I had no less desire to do all of the things I was doing now. The very first thing I thought about, the thing I was thinking about when it hit me, was the Taylor Dewar film. Because, for my process of filmmaking is not to go just find an external story to capture it. It is I absolutely fall in love and in intimacy with the story that I'm doing, and I go through the journey, and then I try to express that journey to an audience that they can experience, and that's just the way I make movies. And that's so they are, without being cheesy, that is as much me as anything else. And I love Taylor dearly, and I want his story to get told, so I have a great love for him and his family, and so I want all the rewards that I didn't want that any less. When I was lit up, one of the first things I did is I was like, well, I wonder if there's a better perspective from this place to be able to sell this movie, or how I should be doing it. And it didn't. I just still loved him, and I still wanted to sell the movie as much as I did. I recognized more that I didn't have any control over it. I recognized more that, I can do all of the things that I know I'm supposed to do, but at the end of the day, I am the wave, and this ocean is going in the currents it's going to go in. And sometimes I'm going to like those, and sometimes I'm not going to like those, but that literally has nothing to do with it. That has nothing to do with it. That is the wave wanting to, crash on this shore versus this shore. Like, okay, but the wave understanding I am the ocean, so it doesn't really, but the desire was no less. The drive, if you will, was no less. I had no less desire to be a good father to my children. I have no less desire. When I am truly in it, I have more desire to be Mike Ramsdell, because I'm finally touching the truth and expressing me as opposed to me as this fucking illusion my mind made up. And that is exhausting. And here's the other thing, is that I'm wildly more productive and, knock on wood, been wildly more successful since I've really started to make these major shifts, because everything is coming from a place of truth as opposed to a place of illusion.
Man, that's deep. And I mean, this is incredibly powerful, and it would be a whole nother thing to try to delve into. But as you talk about this, I've actually had a couple moments in my life where I felt the only way I could describe it is like if normally you were operating in a fog that you didn't really see. Like you're in a certain fog, but it feels normal. It's your normal experience. And I've had very strong moments in my life, especially at 3 a.m. on the couch, that one time that I wrote that story about that we talked about before this podcast, that I had this unbelievable clarity feeling. Like I can't describe it to you other than my best way to articulate it is if you were in a fog that you didn't know existed, and then someone removed all the fog, and I had the most like, not even just sharpness or like a clarity, but like an incredibly highly energized in the moment without thinking too much that I was in. I can't really describe it. I mean, it was just such a powerful, like I'm awake. Like that's the way you said it is a very good way to think about it. Like something I snapped out of a certain story. Like I was in a movie here, I was in a fog, and it went away for a second. And then I said, wait a second. What am I? What do I want? What am I doing? Why did I not before consider what I'm doing? Why is this happening right now? And those moments were the most powerful, profound experiences. And I've also had it in small times, driving in a vehicle, and I'm in a deep train of thought one time during a trip out to Philadelphia, and bang, and I'm in the most clear, dialed in, different existence. And it's I remember those.
But you weren't any less you, right?
No,
and
100% not.
You were even more you.
I was more me without the distractions that I had ever been.
Yeah, it's like putting on a t-shirt and thinking the t-shirt is you. No, it's just what I'm dressing myself in.
Yeah.
It's just
I've experienced those moments. I had never experienced a moment where I like disconnected from me, but I've experienced extreme moments of clarity where, wait a second, what am I doing? That's not me. This is you.
Right.
This is what, I don't know. It's so hard to find words for this. I think a lot because we don't really talk about these things very much.
Well,
we don't.
They're hard to think. I mean, everybody who does talk about this stuff, language, this is beyond language. That's why it's hard.
Because it's such a profound feeling, like vibration. I don't even know what you'd try to call it, that you can't encapsulate it in just only a couple words because you won't paint a true picture, and then you feel like you're not portraying it correctly. Right. So then there's a breakdown of communication. But yeah, I think if people more often sat down and tried to find this and looked for quiet more and looked to, calm a little bit of the chaos in the mind, we would make progress. Because without going too off topic, a lot of the kids that come in here that are struggling, or people in general, adults that sit down that are struggling, they're so clouded and absolutely battered by a million things that it's like if you can almost just compartmentalize for a short period of time and get away from what's been injected into their mind versus what they are, that's where I make so much progress with so many people. Like so many people sit down and have a conversation with me. I'm not going to name one gentleman that completely turned his life around recently. I don't want to put him on unless he wanted me to. But all I had to do was show him that like there was a bunch of madness in the way that isn't his. And if he lets go of that and then just takes a step back, there's progress. And it's like you snap a finger and now he's on a different life trajectory. Why are we not doing this more even within our families? Because it might be very difficult to go outside. Who wants to sit down with you or I? Let's say someone is living a life that we know is full of illusions. They're not doing a good job. If they don't seek you out, or there's not a level of appreciation, admiration, or some type of respect that they're truly receptive to the information. And even when they think they are, they're still the filter. So to permeate that filter when I speak to people is already difficult. But if we started small within our families and the people closest to us, that can radiate out extremely. These conversations are extremely powerful because it's about the essence of life, but they're never it's never done.
Not, I mean, only in places.
Only in small.
You're weird. You know, like I spend a lot of time. I have my books that I read. I have, you know, certain spiritual teachers, if you will, that I follow. But even most spiritual gurus are, you know, Tony Robbins. That's who people turn to. You know, he's not a spiritual leader. And I have nothing against Tony Robbins. I've listened to his stuff, but he's literally just trying to change the story in your mind to a more positive
He's
story.
making you more positive, which gives you better positive yields. You get better better yields.
Yes. If you're going to be trapped in a room, you might as well have pretty paint on the wall.
Yeah.
But
you're on a journey to escape the room.
Yeah, to realize that I'm way bigger than the room ever could be.
It's incredible, man. And we have crushed such a good podcast here that I honestly think we wrap this up here, but I would love to do more with you.
Anytime.
I'd love to do more in some different topics of life and maybe delve into some of the problems that are facing society. And I mean, because the world's chaos right now, worse than it's been in a long time. You know what I mean? You have all cops are bastards being preached. You have racial tension extremely high. You have two political parties that are at brink of a civil war, or at least they have their soldiers at that level. Maybe at the top level, they're more civil than what they portray. But you have people that are truly in chaos. You have a lot of people living unfulfilled lives, not seeking passion, not even trying to work within, not even trying to get to the essence. And I would love to talk more, you know, into those topics. Even just for the beautiful thing about why I started this podcast is like, even if not a single person ever listened, I would love these conversations
because they're great conversations.
100%.
Absolutely.
So as I said to Stacy, and she was like, "You're gonna, you know, go all on the podcast," and I go, "Yeah, because it's for me. It's I just desire it, regardless of whether a single person consumed this content or not. I'm not doing it because I want to be James the podcast host. I'm not doing it because I need to make money from the podcast.
But
I'm doing it because
Spotify buys it for $100 million. That's not a bad thing.
I wouldn't complain. I 100% wouldn't complain. But yeah, the idea is, you know, these conversations are so valuable to me that I really think that, and you know, some people will tune in and we'll all connect on different levels of the frequency and we'll connect on different levels of understanding. But, you know, words have power. One of the things I've learned throughout my life is the imagination is one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful tools. I even think the imagination is more powerful than the thinking mind, because when you can imagine things, you can start to create a new story. When you think about a problem or you're trying to solve the situation you're in, or you're still in that story. The imagination almost gets you to stretch the envelope of the story. Like, I'm very good. I think that's one of the main tools of my life is I'm super unrealistic. I'm very good at stretching what I believe to be possible and then like trying to find a way to create that. And I think if we could get people to come together more and use their imagination tied in with what really matters, what we really are, what things we need to do to provide a better experience while we're in this thing. You know what I mean? There's so much power there. And you can take inspiration from, you know, the John Lennon Imagine song, but if you do nothing with it, it doesn't do anything. We have to really use our imaginations, use our mental power, and try to reshape the story of the world. If you do that, that's powerful, and that's something that I'm signed up for.
100%. 100%. I have watched your imagination go, and I have watched the fuel you put behind it, and I have seen the fruits of it. I mean, and that's, you know, we started talking about jiu-jitsu, and I know we're going to wrap this up, so I won't say this too long. Yes, I fell in love with jiu-jitsu, and I have fallen in love with jiu-jitsu. The first 3 years, though, that I was doing jiu-jitsu, my main draw was being in this environment, because there's not any other environments that I know of that I could go to and I can be surrounded by people, regardless of what I don't interact with people very much outside of the gym. So I don't know their personal lives. I don't know their politics. I don't know their thinking or anything. I think for the most part, people are pretty good people. But this place, everybody comes together. they have imagined something better for themselves, and they pursue that here through the martial arts. And to just be in an environment where people are recognizing I can be a better person, and then pursuing that, whether that's to be a world champion, whether it's to lose 20 pounds, whether it's be just to learn to master triangle choke, I don't give a shit. If you're trying to better yourself, that's wonderful energy. That's what brought me to this environment. That's what kept me in this environment. Now I love jiu-jitsu, so even if this place went away, I'd still pursue jiu-jitsu. But this environment is very hard to find in the world, and that's why I think you've been so successful. That's why I think this gym has been so successful, is because it is a safe place to be who you are and admit, I would like to be better than I am right now. And it's a supportive group.
I never really, I've thought about it that way, but the way you just worded it, we have a room of people that are imagining, that are living in that good part of life, in that thing that makes us want to become not better in the way of like to acquire more, just to grow, to stretch, to be, to exist, to interact. And it is infectious energy. Like people always think I'm like just always, man, this place just charges me up. The vibrations in this room, when you get that type of passion all together, it's unbelievable. I think that's why our retention rate is like through the roof. Like people are like, you don't market. Like as in business, I'm the worst businessman on the planet. Like I don't follow every mold. I don't market. I don't do these things. I don't pass out flyers. I don't, but we have energy here. And everybody says that about here. Anyone that walks in the door.
Is undeniable. It's undeniable. And you probably take it for granted maybe sometimes only because it's all born. You are the seed that grew the oak tree, basically. You're the acorn that grew the oak tree, and we're just the branches and the leaves and all that kind of stuff. So you might not recognize it as much but it is very hard to find this kind of, especially today. Think about it. I come in here, now I'm probably more liberal than most people here in my belief systems. That doesn't come up. We don't talk about it. If we did, we would talk about, like I can say his name, Chris Fish. Chris Fish and I could not be on more polar. If we met in a political situation, we'd have been fucking fist fighting. Now we're fist fighting, but we do it because we love each other.
Yeah.
And now, again, Anatomy, he taught me that stuff. I try to pretend better than that. But that's what's so beautiful about this place. Like, look, just come here as a human being with whatever objective you have. We will support you in that objective. We will help you in that objective. And so all the energy here is about, this is where I am. The humility and vulnerability to say, this is where I am, and this is where I want to go, and this is the place I'm going to come to grow that. That's that kind of safety, that kind of environment where you can be that safe, where you can be that open, where you can admit those kinds of things, where you can pursue that, and where you can have support to pursue that, is almost
Man, because without the labels, because think about it, if you're in a part of a religious group that provides you great support, yeah, but you're all attuned into that same label. It's almost like this is a place that's embodying that essence of growth and the goodness within us, but without like, you have to be this, you have to be that. I mean, although we are martial artists, really you don't even have to be. You could just be coming in and lose weight.
You just come in to lose weight.
You are welcome as a human being that wants to have that good energy. A lot of times in my head, I've thought about like, well, there's probably a lot of other groups that people get the same feeling as here, but it is different because they're subscribing to a certain thing or ideology, and that's why they're like, okay, that's my group.
Right.
Here, it doesn't matter. You're a person. Like, it doesn't run through my mind. Is this person a Republican or a liberal or a Democrat? I don't even think about it. Are you religious or non-religious? I don't think about it. These are labels that don't matter. You're a man.
You're a man.
You're a woman.
Wow, you got a good left hook. Wow, you've lost a lot of weight. Wow, your triangle choke's gotten a lot better. Good for you. Keep going. Wow, that was really good. All of that is just, it's here. And and what's ironic is it's the most competitive place I've ever been to.
Yeah.
It's all competition. And it's beautiful competition. And it's
what a melting pot.
It is. And so, again, I don't know exactly what you said that just got me on that train, but the idea that this is the place where you can come and you can be safe and you can admit that and you can turn off those stories and you can just be, it's wonderful.
World could use a little bit more of it. So,
well, you did a great job starting it, James Gray.
Great
job.
I appreciate it. Man, hour and a half. We just made a feature film, 90 minutes.
Anybody who made it to the end, if you can text this code, bananas, to James Gray.
Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely incredible. 90 minutes, and it was effortless dialogue. You know what I mean? It's we need more of this. We need words. We need imagination. We need people coming together. We need to drop the labels. We need to drop the madness. We need to just support each other and love and appreciate people that are different than you. That's like one of the biggest things that's happened to me as I've gotten a little bit older. Is like, because I remember being that young man that was like, these people are sheep. They're blind. They're never going to chase their dream. I just appreciate people now, man. We're all on our different journey. We're all on a different stage of life. And it's weird when you just have that, you just have love for people.
Right.
You know what I mean? I'm like, sometimes I can look at some people like, they're so different than me. And I think they're so off the tracks. And I think they're headed for disaster. But you know what? I can appreciate them. They're on their journey. And hopefully they find what they're looking for. Yeah. So, Ramsdell, this has been stellar. You will absolutely be on the podcast again. And, just thank you so much for joining me today, and we'll wrap this thing up.
Thank you, brother. Pleasure.